Hello, Giants fans, and welcome to the Valentine's Views podcast here on Big Blue View Radio, part of your SB Nation family of podcasts. It's another Victory Monday for your New York Giants. And before we get into discussing it, just a reminder to like, share, and subscribe on YouTube if you're watching us there, and subscribe across the Big Blue View Radio network wherever you listen to podcasts as well. I'm joined as always on Mondays by Big Blue View's Tony DelGenio. And Tony, we have yet another Victory Monday to discuss for the Giants.
Yeah, it's a little bit strange for a Victory Monday because I really don't know how I felt about that game yesterday. But 7-2 is 7-2, and there aren't many teams that you can say that about in the NFL. So.
Yes, it is. I guess we fall back on the Bill Parcells. You are what your record says you are, sort of game. But I will admit, I was in MetLife Stadium. I was in the press box, and halftime of that game came along, and media finishes up their work, and we go to grab a quick bit of food to bring back to our desks, and like we're all looking at each other, shaking our heads, going, "This is just a terrible game. This is just a terrible football game," and it's showing us that maybe the Giants just aren't that good, but they managed to win it. And for me, in a lot of ways, it's just a typical grind it out, close Giants game. They're not ever going to blow anybody out. They're not ever going to make anybody look awful. That's just what they are.
Yeah. And I mean, I wrote last week that the Houston Texans actually aren't getting blown out by people. They've had a lot of close losses. Even the most recent one before the Giants game against Philadelphia, they only lost by 12 points, and they were tied in that game halfway through the third quarter. And so, I during that game, I was kind of trying to listen to my own advice and say, well, remember, Houston, they're not as bad as they look. They actually keep games close with other teams and so on and so forth. But it's just hard to get away from the feeling, especially after the Giants had that opening touchdown drive, which they just kind of moved methodically downfield and then got the touchdown to Lawrence Cager, all right, of all people, the tight end of the week, the player of the week that they bring in out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Never heard of it before, and he scores a touchdown. And I said, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the Giants actually can kind of dominate this team and go ahead. And then that was it for a long time after that.
Well, yeah. I mean, there were two opportunities in the second quarter where the Giants should have put up points. They get 4th and 1 at the Houston 35, and they go to the jumbo offensive line package, which 8 offensive linemen, and I was getting a kick out of it because the referee had never announced anything like this before, and you could tell he was like, I'm not sure how to do this. 64, 77, and 75, all report eligible. And then I hear him mutter under his breath, I think.
And
he hadn't turned the microphone off yet. And I was like, I'm laughing. But, they get a false start. They have to punt. Gillen hits a terrible punt. The next drive, they get all the way down to the 27. Wan'Dale Robinson decides to run backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And then for whatever reason, 2nd and 15, the Giants run up the middle. Then they get a sack, and they have to punt again. So there were opportunities there to blow that game open. And the flip side of that was, watch the Dallas game. The Cowboys blew a big lead that should have been a whole lot bigger. So that's sort of typical of the NFL, but it's frustrating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as you said, that second quarter in particular was maddening for the Giants. And I found myself kind of scratching my head at some of the play calls. Never mind some of the execution, like you say, the Wan'Dale Robinson play where he decided to lose 10 yards and gain back 5 of the 10 that he had lost.
Well, I mean, once he had lost about 15 yards, he did a good job getting some of it back. But I was like, oh, dude, you're going the wrong way.
Yeah.
But anyway, You mentioned play calling, Tony, and I think we have to talk about that a little bit. Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka have done a terrific job with this Giants offense. You know, Daboll turning the play calling over to Kafka and letting him do, you know, what he does. And Kafka's done a tremendous job. That said, yesterday I was shaking my head at the incredibly conservative nature of what the Giants did. Saquon Barkley had a great day, but there were so many times, 2nd and 15 at Houston's 32-yard line, and they run up the middle. You know, 2nd and 10, and I think at one point in the second or third quarter, and they run for the 4th straight time. It felt like we feel like we're better than the Texans, and we're just going to run the football and try not to make mistakes, and they'll screw this up and we'll win anyway. And it just felt like the Giants were playing a 1940s game plan, and I didn't understand it.
Yeah, I didn't either. And the particular plays that you mentioned were the ones that really puzzled me. But throughout the game, and the funny thing about it all is that Daniel Jones wound up having statistics coming out of the game that if you had just kind of looked from the outside, you say, wow, this guy played a tremendous game today at 153 passer rating. He had, like, I think, an 80 point something quarterback rating, and adjusted completion percentage of 88.7%, or something like that. But basically they didn't ask him to do anything.
Right. It was that I think that passer adjusted completion percentage was Kenny Golladay adjusted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
Basically, it was Kenny Golladay adjusted, but we'll get into that later. As you indicated, I thought that Jones played very well. I don't think there was a single throw yesterday that Jones, put in jeopardy. I can't remember one anyway where the ball was in jeopardy of being intercepted. Any throws where he let the ball go, and I was like, that might be bad. But
I'll give you one counter to that, and it was actually the biggest play of the game, the 54-yard touchdown pass to Slayton. He got rid of that ball while he was falling backwards with a couple of defensive linemen right in his nose. And when he got rid of that ball, in the back of my mind, I'm saying, oh, this has pick 6 written all over. And fortunately, Jalen Petrie was well off Slayton, and then took a bad angle to the tackle, so everything wound up good. But that one, I was holding my breath.
Yeah, I had it. I'm sitting in the press box. I mean, we're in the 6th floor at MetLife Stadium, so we're way up high, and I had a different view of that play. You could see that he was really, really lucky to get the ball off and did a good job throwing it on target. But from where we were, you could see that the defensive back was so far off that the ball was never in jeopardy of being caught by anybody but Slayton. So
given that he got it off
right
with sufficient velocity, and I was worried that he'd wind up throwing a floater in that situation, because he was off balance, falling backwards. The guy's 6'5" and an athlete, and so he can do things that I can't do.
He can do some things I can't do either. Going back to Kafka for a minute, as conservative as the game plan was, and we've wondered why he ran so much. The other incredibly mystifying sequence to me was the very end of the first half. I think the Giants get the ball with 23 seconds left, 85 yards to go. No, I think they had one timeout or whatever, and they decide to throw. And I turned to the people next to me in the press box, and I said, all that's going to happen here is something bad. Jones is going to get hit. He's going to fumble, or something bad is going to happen here. And what happened on the last play of the half? He took a huge hit. I was like, the only thing you do here is you run out the clock. But so I just going back to Kafka, as I just didn't think it was his best day. It was kind of mystifying. And yet that defense, Saquon Barkley playing as well as I think he's ever played, and the fact that the Texans just weren't good enough to take advantage of some of the opportunities that the Giants afforded them, and the Giants are 7-2.
Yeah, and I think the question this raises, I think, going forward is, will they? And they did this earlier in the year, naturally, okay, but recently they've been extremely conservative in, as you say, in what they're doing. Not just in this game, really, but in the Seattle game too. I thought they were pretty conservative, and uh, are they ever going to open it up? Do they ever see an opponent that they think they can go downfield on, or are they going to do this for the rest of the season? And it works against Houston, and they're 7-2, and so you can't argue with the results. I think they're tied for the second best record in the NFL with Kansas City, right? But just behind Philadelphia. So how can you argue with that? You can't argue with that. It does make me wonder, though, about what the strategy is going ahead in the season, where they're going to start to play some more potent teams.
Yeah, there have to be games coming up on the schedule where this ground and pound, control the clock, sort of keep the score down, put pressure on the other guy, to basically, play really solid defense and capitalize on mistakes. There have to be games where the Giants are going to have to open it up, going to have to score more. And I'm with you. I wonder when that's going to be. I mean, I can't see this approach working against Dallas. I can't see it working against Minnesota. I can't see it working against the Eagles, who the Giants have to play twice. It might not even work against Washington, which is not as bad as people think. So I'm waiting for it as well.
Yeah, I don't even know if it'll work next week against Detroit, because Detroit, which has a bad defense, they have a very potent offense. Detroit puts points up on the board, and so you might have to get ready to trade scores with them for a while if you're going to hope to defeat them. And I think the part that's puzzling me right now is that I'm not seeing the creativity that I thought we saw early in the season. I thought the Giants were extremely creative in their offense, let's say against Green Bay, just as one example. And in some of the things even they did against Tennessee, going all the way back. And I loved seeing the really interesting route combinations and the use of motion and things like that in the backfield, and all the deception. And I feel like the last couple of weeks they've stopped doing a lot of that.
Although, in a way, the jumbo 8 offensive lineman package is a little bit creative, but it is sort of like, okay, we're running the football. We don't have any tight ends who can block, so we're just putting every offensive lineman available into the game, and we're just going to try to crush you.
The upside of that is it's nice to see Nick Gates on the field, and I think we saw Matt Peart on the field yesterday.
Yes, we did.
Right? Also,
yes, we did.
And so it's great to actually see those guys getting back on the field after major injuries, and it makes you wonder what the long-term plan might be like for guys like that. And it's fine to use them that way for now, but the bright side for me is with some of these guys on the offensive line beginning to come back, might they actually have some really good depth on the offensive line going forward?
Absolutely. The one thing that I do worry about, and I'm sure that the Giants are aware of this, I did the math last night, and far be it, I'm not a mathematician, but I think I can add. And Saquon Barkley had a career high 352 touches as a rookie. He's on a pace this year with an additional game and with 2 games. The Chicago game earlier in the year was a 31 carry game for him that was at the time his career high. And yesterday was 35 carries. He's on a pace to touch the ball 428 times this year. That's just insane. And at some point, as great a player as he is, the Giants, they've got to take a little bit of that load off the guy.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing, by the way, you mentioned Saquon Barkley. That one thing that's really surprised me this year, other than just the great amount of times he's carried the ball, is how little they've used him in the passing game. And I really thought coming into the season that was actually going to be a big focus for them, because he's been very dangerous in the past, especially as a rookie, in the passing game. And they've done very little. I thought we'd see Saquon on real routes all season and things like that, and they're just not doing that with him.
No, they're not. Not at this point. I think a lot of what they're doing when they do throw the ball is keeping that back in, or a lot of times they're taking Saquon out and putting Matt Breida in, as a blocking back. I think a lot of times they're using that running back to fortify the pass protection, which, with Tyree Phillips over on the right side and Josh Azudu playing left guard, is a little bit, it's a little bit sketchy sometimes. Mark Glowinski's a good player, but he's a better run blocker than pass blocker. So I think that's some of what we're seeing. But I'm with you. I thought the Giants would throw the ball to Saquon more than they have.
And the other thing that in the back of my mind, and I don't know whether coaches even do this, is whether they're thinking ahead to future games and the fact that the schedule is close to becoming more difficult for them for most of the rest of the season. And are they just not showing everything that they have right now, and playing conservatively purposely, and saving some of the things that they have in their pocket for games when they know it's going to be more of a challenge to keep up with the other team and win the game. And I don't know whether NFL coaches do that, or whether they just kind of think in the, let's just worry about this week and not worry about games that are coming in the future.
Yeah, I don't think any NFL coach will ever tell you that he's thinking about anything except, that week's game. So I don't know about that. I think that each and every week teams try to have wrinkles and different things that they haven't shown before, like the Giants going to that big offensive lineman package this past week. But Tony, one of the things we have to talk about, and I've written about this at Big Blue View, I've written about the job that Joe Shane and the Giants pro personnel staff have done this year in finding players to add to this roster, basically from the beginning of September on. And what we've seen all year long is contributions from bottom of the roster guys, from guys who weren't on the roster at the beginning of the season, from guys that are being elevated from the practice squad. And Sunday we saw a touchdown and an onside kick recovery from Lawrence Cager. We saw 2 catches for first downs from Isaiah Hodgins, who's been there for a week. We saw Jason Pinnock with a sack and a half, couple of quarterback hits, guy that had played 1 defensive snap all year. We had key interception from Dane Belton. Fumble recovery, which could have been 2 fumble recoveries except for an overturned review, for Jalen Smith, who wasn't part of this team. And it's just amazing. I mean, at some point, the absence of a guy like Xavier McKinney is going to hurt the Giants. It has to. At some point, the fact that they just don't have a number 1 wide receiver who demands a double team is going to hurt this team. But it's amazing to me that they keep getting contributions basically from nowhere.
Yeah, I would guess that for your typical fan like me, if you look at the Giants org chart, the part of it that you probably skip over and don't think about at all, or wonder, well, what does that department even do, is the personnel department, right? And you say, well, what does that even mean? And I think we're actually seeing a pretty amazing example of what the pro personnel department on an NFL team actually does. Because as you say, they're just shuttling guys in and out and picking guys up off the street and then having them contribute. I mean, and Dable said this, I guess, at the beginning of the year. You're on the team. We're going to put you in. If you're active that day, we're going to put you in. We're going to use you. And certainly he's been true to his word about that.
Absolutely. I think Joe Shane said during the bye week that according to the Giants' own study of rosters across the league, that they had more players on their roster and had gotten more playing time from players who weren't on the roster at the end of training camp than any other team in the league. And it's a credit to Shane, Brandon Brown, Dennis Hickey, Tim McDonald, all of those guys who do that work. Chris Rossetti, I think, is another one in that pro personnel department. And it's a credit to that coaching staff to get these guys ready to play so quickly. I don't know how long they can keep this up, but it's amazing.
Yeah, and as you say, just yesterday, Lawrence Cager's in there, and he catches a TD pass. He should have caught a long pass in the Seattle game, except Jones overthrew him. Right, and then you have Isaiah Hodgins, who just comes in out of the blue and makes two nice catches. He got something at I think 40 yards receiving yesterday, and he actually looks like a decent guy out there that you could, I don't want to say make a focal point of your offense or anything, but somebody who can help you get first downs on drives. And of course, Shane knew him from having been in Buffalo, but still, well, that's why you bring somebody in from another organization, because they have experience with some personnel around the league that you might not have. But they're doing a great job finding guys to actually do stuff. And this is where I think you have to give the coaches credit, because the coaches coach these guys up and get them into a position where they can actually function on an NFL field. Never mind what the coaches do with the established players, some of whom are playing out of their minds this year. And I have one person in particular in mind when I say that, and that's
the big guy that wears number 97, maybe
7. Yeah, right.
Yes.
And and it's like, man, what is he eating this year? But I just have to think it's the coaching that has taken him from being kind of a good, very solid, sometimes dangerous interior defensive lineman to, I don't know what you'd call him this year. I saw you wrote that, he's not Aaron Donald, but this year he's not far from what Aaron Donald is.
No, and I always go back to it. I sat with Dexter one-on-one during training camp, and we talked about the fact that he had been good for his first few years with the Giants, but that people thought there was another level that he could reach. And he agreed with that. And he talked about wanting to reach that level and how he thought defensive line coach Andre Patterson could help him get there. Patterson's a guy that had a lot of success in Minnesota, coached Linval Joseph in Minnesota, who had the best years of his career playing for Patterson, coached Danielle Hunter in Minnesota, a lot of other guys that he coached, who have been really, really good defensive linemen over the years. And I think that whether it's Patterson or whether it's just growth from Lawrence or whether it's a combination of both, he's just playing incredibly, incredibly well. I've said he's a Pro Bowl player. Honestly, I think he should get all pro consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if he doesn't make the Pro Bowl this year, at least I don't know what's wrong out there, because if you looked at his game yesterday, he was just absolutely dominant. I mean, he was in Davis Mills' face all game. And I think he had like 8 pressures or something like that.
8 pressures, 5 quarterback hits, up and down the line of scrimmage, making stops on run plays that 340-pound people just shouldn't have the athleticism to make it. It's amazing to watch. Tony, we have to talk about it. The flip side of Dexter Lawrence is the sad story of Kenny Golladay and what has happened to a guy who was a really good player for the Detroit Lions just a couple of years ago, was a guy who Giants fans were excited about bringing to New York when the Giants signed him. He looked like that big contested catch guy, that Hakeem Nicks type player that Eli Manning had, that the Giants didn't have. And Golladay just looks like a shell of himself, of what he used to be. He's obviously not the player that he used to be. And, some dummy at Big Blue View wrote the other day that Golladay could perhaps have a good second half of the season and be productive for the Giants. And I think that prediction has quickly been blown to smithereens. But yeah, so maybe I'm out of the prediction business.
So yeah, so I have to say, I think like the betting is, do you even see him in the game next week? My own pick here, is that he will be, because it's the Lions and they're going to give him a chance against his old team. But
I just don't know. I mean, it felt to me like he might have really seen his last best chance to contribute to this team, slip away, literally, as he dropped the ball to the turf.
Yeah, I didn't blame him for the first one, because the first one was kind of a poorly thrown pass by.
Yeah, the first one was.
I can imagine another receiver kind of laying out and getting that pass, but I think when you're breaking across the field on that type of route, what you're thinking about is grabbing the pass and then quickly turning upfield. You're not thinking about just laying out and catching the ball and getting a 10-yard gain, or however many yards downfield he was on that. So I can give him a pass.
I didn't think the first one was a drop. I thought the first one was a ball that's just out of his reach. He might have gotten a fingertip on it, but I thought if he caught that would have been a really good catch.
Yeah. It was the second one that you're just scratching your head. You say he just put it right in his breadbasket and he didn't catch it. And what's wrong that he's not able to make these catches now? And I think it's a complete mystery. I mean, this is a guy. Last time the Giants played the Detroit Lions, he caught 2 touchdown passes against the Giants. That was
right. That's a guy who's made his living, making contested catches, making the difficult catches, and that was as easy as it gets for a wide receiver. And that's probably, you catch that's probably a 25-yard catch and run.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what's happened to Golladay, other than I think that Golladay had a hip injury the year before the Giants signed him. I wonder if he's the same athlete that he used to be. I wonder if the hip injury took more away from him than the Giants thought that it might have. And he's had hamstring and knee injuries since coming to New York. And you wonder if one has led to the other and he's just not the same athlete that he used to be.
Yeah, that's the only thing that could possibly explain it, because he's but I don't even understand how that leads to dropping passes that are put right on you. And that second drop yesterday, or the only one that, as you say, that really was a drop. It's not the first time this year that he's dropped passes like that. He had a drop like that, I think, against Dallas in a key situation, if I remember correctly. And he's had a few of that this year. And I just don't know how you don't, when you are a professional receiver, I don't understand how you don't catch balls like that. It's got to be a mystery to everyone.
Oh, I'm sure it's a mystery to everyone. Golladay, to his credit, spoke to media after the game, and he was very terse. He was very short in his answers. I mean, he obviously didn't want to be talking to us, but he did. And it's obvious he doesn't understand it. He doesn't know what's happened here. He's at a loss to explain it. But I think the Giants are at the point where they gave him his opportunity, and you continue to watch guys like Darius Slayton make plays. You watch Isaiah Hodgins make plays. They're so high on Wan'Dale Robinson, and Robinson hasn't had an explosive game yet, but he's catching what's coming his way. He's helping the offense, and you look at those guys, and it's hard to see why they would continue to give Golladay snaps at this point.
Yeah, I'm personally hoping they give him one more shot against Detroit. I mean, Slayton's a good example. We didn't even know whether Slayton was going to make the team during training camp, and I think it was sort of, I felt like there was like a death watch on Slayton during training camp, just waiting for the day that they would release him in one of their cuts, and then the season began and they didn't use him at all, even though he made the team. He was mostly on the bench, and then all of a sudden, I think I don't know, around week 4 or something like that, they started to throw the ball his way, and he started to do well. And so I'd like to think that there is a possibility that Golladay can still come back, and if there is any chance of that, I think next week has got to be the week, not only playing his old team, but the fact that after next week, the Giants get into the really serious part of their schedule that's truly going to determine whether they become a playoff team or not. And so I think there's got to be no more fooling around with personnel once you get to that part of the schedule. And so we'll see if he sees the field or not against Detroit.
Well, it'll be interesting, and as you said earlier, Tony, I think this is an interesting game, largely because it might be a game where the Giants have to put up some points. I think we talked about that a little bit earlier, but this just turn and hand the ball off might not work this coming Sunday.
Yeah, Detroit has a very dangerous passing game. And Jared Goff, who has this reputation, I think, of being a subpar quarterback. He's really not a bad quarterback. It's just that he's not a great quarterback. And I think he got this bum rap when basically Sean McVay was kind of calling everything for him into the headset, because he couldn't read defenses himself. And and he's not a great quarterback, but he's far from a bad quarterback also. And he's got that offense humming. They score against almost everyone. They've got a great receiver, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is the steal of the draft last year, who had 112 yards in receptions yesterday, and they've got a good offensive line. That's another thing about next week, is that Detroit's offensive line is much better than Houston's was, and so getting pressure on the quarterback is not going to be as easy. So yeah, I think the Giants are going to have to score some points next week if they hope to win the game.
All right. Well, we will see what happens, and we'll see what unfolds this week as the Giants get ready for the Lions. Tony, thank you as always for a few minutes. I know you're looking over your shoulder there, waiting for a cable guy to come, I think. So
I will see. I always worry now that I said, no, you can't come between 10 and 11. Now, how long am I going to have to wait to actually see him?
Well, let me get you out of here before the guy's banging on your door. So thank you much. And Giants fans, thank you as always for listening. Please remember to stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. All right.